welcome to another fantastic edition of the Cybersecurity Matters podcast. I'm your co-host, Dominic Vogel, and joining me as always is my good friend in crime here, Mr. Christian Redshaw. Christian, I am going to ask you how you're doing today.
I am doing very well. I've got my new skincare going on today to help me with my sleep deprivation, so I hope I look as good as I feel.
You have a radiating glow to you, my friend. So let's embrace that warmth, and in the spirit of warmthness, who is our guest today?
Well, we have Marc Perreault, and he's the Security Services Manager at a company called Compugen. This is a very smart but very cool, very well-spoken individual, and I'm so looking forward to getting into the mix with some heated questions for Marc today.
It's going to be really fascinating, and I know he's waiting for us. He's coming to us live from Winnipeg, so we will take a pause here, and we'll bring Marc on shortly.
Let's do it. Marc Perreault from friendly Manitoba, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Awesome. So we want to get to know you really quickly here first, and then I've got some red hot questions to hit you with out of the gate here. So you're with Compugen, you're in cybersecurity, you've been in IT. What has been your career journey so far?
So actually it's kind of odd. I graduated out of college as a gas turbine mechanic, so I'm actually licensed to work on jet engines, believe it or not. But through the beginning of my career, I worked for an aerospace company, and I started to show some of my personal IT skills to some of the people that work there, and it eventually transitioned into a role within IT. So just desktop level and that kind of thing. And then eventually it ended up growing into more of the server space and network space. So primarily my career has been around network and firewall. I was a collaboration specialist and voice architect for quite a while. And then as that seemed to kind of be going away in the industry, I started to focus more of my efforts in learning more about cybersecurity. So I ended up challenging the CISSP in about a 3-month time frame, managed to pass on the first go, which was crazy. I still can't believe that was possible. But yeah, I always had kind of a passion for security, and just continued down that path. And I really appreciate and enjoy working with customers to help them better strengthen their cybersecurity. And if there's any time that they need it, it's now. There's, as everybody in the cybersecurity world knows, things like ransomware and malware and these supply chain related attacks are becoming more and more prevalent, and organizations need cybersecurity support more than ever.
Well, I feel like we're in the presence of greatness here. I feel like your intellect is a few levels above mine to be able to challenge that exam in 3 months, and that's okay. I'm comfortable with that. That is big congratulations to you. So my next question then is, Compugen is the company that you're with. What does Compugen offer the world?
So Compugen is, classified as a value-added reseller, where we partner with all the major, IT OEMs out there: Cisco, Microsoft, VMware, Trend Micro. Basically, if you name any of the top tier ones, we're typically a reseller. But on top of that, where we really bring a lot of value is our people. So we have a very strong bench across from technical services to managed services and into professional services and consulting. So we really help customers, achieve whatever their goals are from the infrastructure side, managing their environments, and then on top of that, we're really trying hard to provide a lot of value on the security consulting front now. And that's a piece that's a bit newer and that I'm developing within the organization, but we've been moving strong on it in the last 12 to 18 months or so.
It sounds pretty robust, and obviously with all of that going on, there's a great need for cybersecurity. So now I want to get into my big question that I've been sitting on here. I am wondering what your take on the ROI of cybersecurity is for your clients and for really any organization that's out there. Why is cybersecurity important? Why does cybersecurity matter? And my mind goes to the end, right? Start with the end in mind, and I think about nasty cyber attacks and cyber incidents. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. Based on my experience with dealing with different cyber incidents for customers, I guess the areas that you see the biggest harm, and I guess where the attacks really hit home for the organizations are in areas such as loss of productivity. That can be for a manufacturing type of organization, that can be in the millions of dollars by the hour, right? So there's a huge amount of loss of revenue in that perspective. The amount of loss of reputation in some cases, if you look at some of the different industries in finance or in healthcare, you can sustain some pretty bad press if you've been hacked or if data's been leaked. So being able to protect those assets is very crucial to these organizations, and really having a good cyber security strategy and investing your money in the right areas based on the sensitivity of data and your assets is really key. And that's where we really try to help our customers, better understand what the value is of their assets and of their data. Because overall, if you're not protecting that, and that's your kind of key, I guess your key piece to your customers, then you're in a lot of trouble, right? So really, it's about protecting your assets at the end of the day, and that return on investment. I mean, I can tell you, I've seen some cyber attacks that recovery has gone in the excess of 2 to 3 months to get the entire environment back up and running. So for any organization, that's crippling, and and that costs a lot of money. If you have to get a company engaged on that, it can be almost in the millions of dollars sometimes, depending on how large your environment is.
I'm almost certain we've never had anyone who was qualified to work on a jet engine on the show before, so you've earned that distinction as well. I'd love to get your opinion here. I mean, if you take just your average small or mid-sized organization in Canada, what are some basic, let's just call them best practices or basic cyber hygiene that these organizations should focus on in terms of at least starting to build off a strong security foundation?
For sure. Some of the areas that are pretty basic, but that go a long way, are as simple as, a next generation firewall in terms of boundary protection, a solid endpoint detection and response software that, is able to see kind of, differences in behavior of systems on top of detecting malware and having, a reasonable amount of updated signatures and that type of thing. Those two areas go a long way. The other one that to me is it's crucial is security awareness training. And things like phishing campaigns. We hate as people to say in cybersecurity that people are the weakest link. It's unfortunate, but it's true. And really empowering your people and training them on what to look for in terms of malicious activity or emails or anything like that, clicking on links, all of that stuff. If you can teach your people to identify those potential threats ahead of time, you're way better off. And so as far as I'm concerned, that's one of the organizational type of controls, I guess I would call it, that goes a long way. It's not technical. It's all about training and learning.
And that's really great insight, Marc. And in terms of what you're seeing, again, maybe at the SMB side of things, when it comes to investing in cybersecurity, are you seeing it being more reactive? Like, are small, mid-sized organizations only investing in security after there's been a data breach or ransomware or some sort of security incident? Or, is there still a large faction which is doing so proactively? I'm curious to what you're seeing.
There's still the idea out there from a lot of organizations that, they figure to themselves, we're not a target. Why are we a target? What do we present to malicious actors that would make us a target? And that mentality is slowly starting to go away. But what we're seeing in the SMB space is typically they either have the attitude where, again, they think that they're not a threat. The other one is that if another organization in their industry has been hit, that's when the light bulb goes off and they start thinking about, okay, maybe we are potentially, a target. So from that perspective, I think there's a little bit of proactiveness, so things like endpoint detection and response, most organizations are pretty good with that. Next gen firewall, same thing. But where we tend to see some of the weaknesses is still in areas as simple as passwords and multi-factor authentication aren't being applied, especially on cloud and SaaS-based applications or on VPN. So like we always say, the keys to your kingdom are basically easily accessible from those types of external facing services. So you want to have 2 layers of authentication on there. So using multi-factor authentication is huge. So basically, yeah, those are kind of some of the areas where organizations are putting a little bit of proactive activity into there. Where we're seeing less of that is definitely on the incident response side and the preparedness. It's an area where I think a lot of organizations don't even know that exists. If they're not a strong IT-led organization, they don't really see the value until you explain that there's a significant amount of time lost without having a plan in place when you get hit with ransomware or something.
So Marc, can you talk about what happens when an organization isn't prepared with a tested incident response plan? I know that you've had experience with companies that have gone through the worst case scenarios. Can you, without mentioning names or industries if you don't want to, take us through 1 or 2 of those scenarios?
Yeah, for sure. So I've been involved in some actually within the last month even. And the first thing is they have that thought of, I can't believe this happened to us. So there's a lot of just panic at the beginning, where they don't know what to do at all. They reach out to their partners, such as Compugen, to just say, we're in over our heads. We have no idea where to even start. So oftentimes what happens is you end up in this almost like a cycle of, not, I guess from the perspective of not being prepared, they're not sure what to do, right? So they'll ask us, for example, well, what do we do from this point? And so, there's a laundry list of things to do, but having things in place like, an insurance policy is kind of a mandatory thing these days, but having a third-party security organization that's capable of working through the incident response process like ID and containment and eradication and recovery is really critical, because if you don't have that already, if you're trying to get one of those companies engaged when you're getting hit, there's a good chance that they may not be ready to jump on it right away, because there's so many of these activities going on right now that we've seen, even larger IR organizations say, we're tapped out, we can't help. It'll be a day or 2. So really at the end of the day, what they're losing out on is several days of trying to line up resources, trying to line up companies, understanding their incident response, their insurance plan, for what they're able to cover and who can be engaged. There's so many different aspects that if you're not in a full understanding of what your process is, what your insurance policy looks like, you're just running on a hamster wheel for several days before you actually start dealing with the problem itself.
So the moral of the story really is to have something in place before something happens. Get your contracts negotiated in advance, get your insurance ready, get your incident response third-party provider in place, and know who's going to do what in the event of a data breach or a nasty cyber attack.
Absolutely, and then that's one of the things that we developed at Compugen within our organization is an incident response workshop where we work with customers, basically that are in the SMB space, because they're typically the ones that don't have this preparedness, and we help them understand what the process looks like, what the different pieces are that are required. Like a lot of companies don't realize that you need to get legal and marketing heavily involved in an incident response, because they're responsible for communication as well as data protection and liability, right? So it's really important that they are involved and that you understand what their position is in that response, but also that they understand what their role is as well.
Sorry, I'll just ask a quick question. Do you find that with your clients or with companies that you have seen and have experience in general, that they're thinking that their IT department or perhaps their IT managed service provider, being IT, have got cybersecurity covered Really, it's kind of their responsibility, and so they're kind of handling that. Is that something that you find has been an issue, or are you thinking that people are starting to see the difference between security and IT and how they relate to each other?
Yeah, I think that that's going away. Traditionally, system administrators and network administrators were always kind of partially responsible for security, and they did their best at it. I think that mentality is going away, and organizations are starting to understand that you do need to invest in at least one cybersecurity person that understands process and procedure and policy surrounding your organizational security best interests. So it definitely is going in the right direction. I still don't think that I would say less than 50% of organizations have a clear understanding of that. And, it's very apparent to me when we run some of these workshops and we talk about things like, what the kill chain process is and what DR is and what business continuity is. And we ask them, do you have these things in place? And the call just goes silent. And so that is always not a good sign, but that's kind of what we see is just that, that lack of, resourcing investment in their IT departments. So.
And are these CEOs or COOs or CFOs that you're talking to, or are they more IT leaders?
So typically when they're a little bit less mature, I guess, in their security posture, that's usually when we're speaking to, organizations that are 500 seats and less, and it's usually a director of IT or stuff like that. But again, a lot of them are better understanding what the requirements are from a cybersecurity level. So the smaller organizations definitely don't have the same level of maturity, and they're basically thinking, oh yeah, well, my server guy or my person that does server, workstation, network, and everything else, he's like our jack of all trades, has us covered from a security perspective. And I would say probably 9 times out of 10, there's a lot of gaps there.
Marc, I wanted to just talk more about cyber insurance. You were mentioning there, Van, about how it is a very effective risk management tool, and that's absolutely true. Are you seeing, though, organizations that are seeing it or using it as a silver bullet where they think, oh, we don't need to worry about cybersecurity, we'll just get cyber insurance. That's our get out of jail card if something happens, and then they find out that there was an exclusion in there, or that because they weren't addressing the inherent risk that the cyber insurance was null and void. What's sort of the mindset? What do you see with organizations right now? Are they using cyber insurance in the right way, or many of them still using it as, like I said, that get out of jail card?
I would say the majority of them are using it in the right context. They're using it as, potential risk transference where necessary. They're not using it as a silver bullet per se. A lot of them have it knowing that they need it and that they may have to leverage it. But for the most part, we're helping steer organizations in the right area. But I think the majority of them know that the insurance is only going to cover the costs and stuff like that. It's not going to guarantee recovery is going to happen immediately, kind of thing, right? So I think that there's a decent understanding out there that it's helpful, but it's not your end all be all for protection, or I guess for resilience, for example.
I only have one more question. I'll swing it back to Christian to bring it home. But going back to incident response. I know you mentioned about integrating like legal and marketing. How important is it? Maybe we can just expand on it a bit more. How the incident response plan can't just be under IT. How it maybe needs to even roll up under a larger crisis management plan, as an example. Is that something that organizations are realizing, or are they just keeping it sort of within the domain of IT?
Yeah, so oddly enough, in some of the organizations that we've run this workshop with, they have actually said to us, we have crisis management for our business processes, we just don't have them for IT. So a lot of them recognize what it looks like, what the process is, and everything as we work through it. But then I guess they get into better context of what it is for IT as we work through the workshop. So so I think there's a general decent understanding of what the what it's used for and what the benefit is. And then as we work through it from an IT perspective, there's definitely, that's where, like I said, there's a lot of gaps that come up in terms of disaster recovery and business continuity and all of those things. So I hope that answered the question okay.
Absolutely.
So final question for you, Marc. When you're looking at all the industries that you deal with, I mean, there's going to be various degrees of size and maturity there. And I hear somebody's dog in the background. I'm going to think that's maybe Dominic.
Apologies for that.
That's your dog?
No, that's mine. Yeah, must be.
These are the kind of things we love on the show. We've had kids coming on the show, and we just roll with it. That's good.
Yeah.
But of all the industries that you see, what would you say is maybe like a shining star, or at least comparatively doing well in terms of security, best practices, and maturity? Is there anyone that stands out to you at all?
Anyone specifically, like just in the different areas of best practice, you mean?
Yeah, like how are accounting firms doing versus manufacturers versus
I see, in terms of industry.
Services? Yeah, is there one that you think they're kind of leading the charge and doing a good job?
I would say the organizations that we hear the less from, so that would indicate to me that they're likely doing better, is financial services for sure. They're usually pretty strong in controls. And then the other one is healthcare. There are, like, not to say that neither of those organizations or types get hit, but typically I'm seeing a lot less in those industries, whereas I think we're seeing a lot more in education, in manufacturing. Those are two areas where I think they both were under more of an understanding that they were less of a target than, say, things like financial or healthcare. So I think that there's been some degree of I guess I don't want to say lax on the security preparation side of things, but just maybe not the same level of risk awareness. And now it's all changing, right? Like, we're seeing attackers attack anyone and anybody, and it's all 100% financially driven. If they can squeeze, half a Bitcoin out of a company that has nothing to do with any private data, they'll try, right? They don't really care. They're criminals. Like, they have zero agenda to do anything other than get money. So really, I would say that financial and healthcare are both quite good in that respect. But we're still seeing some of the areas in higher ed and manufacturing and just general, I would say general retail business as well as targeted pretty much too. So.
Yeah, such an amazing conversation. I think it's been a while, Marc, since Christian and I have gushed over a guest like you. So this has been an absolutely fantastic conversation. Open invitation to come back anytime. It's I can safely say this has probably been one of our top 5 conversations. And Christian and I genuinely appreciate you taking the time to share your wisdom and insights with us today.
Thanks. No, I appreciate it. It was great to be on. It was really a great experience and great questions from your perspective. I like it.
Thank you so much, Marc.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you again, Marc. And thank you again for being the first person from Winnipeg and the first jet engine person to be able to be on our show. So appreciate your time. And Christian and I will be back momentarily to wrap up today's episode. That was such an engaging conversation, Christian. I mean, I think I could have listened to Marc speak for another 2.5 hours. Like, he is just a wealth of knowledge, really engaging speaker. Very curious to what your key takeaway was from his thoughts today.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, he could have gone on and on. I know there was a lot of depth in that well for us to pull on. And so it is a shame that we had to end it when we did. But what stands out to me is his experience from an incident response perspective, from walking hand in hand with organizations that are, the house is burning around them. They're in the midst of a data breach or cyber attack, and they just are confused. They don't know what to do. They haven't planned. And so what we can take from that is, when the house is burning down is not the time to call a cybersecurity expert or call a digital forensics firm. Although, if you haven't done anything beforehand, yes, it is the time to do that. But a better time would have been, a week ago or a month ago or a year ago. Have an incident response plan and you will know who's doing what and when and why.
Yeah, and that's so well said there, Christian. And for me, I think my key takeaway was he was really, I think Marc did a really great job of talking about the practical and pragmatic steps that small and mid-sized organizations can take. And this isn't rocket science or taking apart a jet engine, which Marc is fully qualified to do. but so I really appreciate him laying that out in very clear, very concise steps for our listeners and viewers. And speaking of which, we're always grateful to our amazing loyal listeners and viewers, and we want to make sure that we thank them, as well as thank Marc for joining us today. As always, please do check out previous podcasts on the Cybersecurity Matters podcast YouTube page, as well as other podcasts that fly under the Conversations That Matter banner, which can also be found on YouTube. But until next time, be well, be safe, and we will catch you next time on the Cybersecurity Matters podcast.